White Centipede Noise Podcast is made possible by your support via Patreon. Go to patreon.com/white centipede noise to support, and stay tuned to hear about the exclusive benefits and bonus content available with this episode. This is White Centipede Noise Podcast. My name is Oscar Brummel, and today my guest is Yosuke Konishi of the underground metal label Nuclear War Now Productions and physical record shop Eastern Front Records, located in Austin, Texas. Yosuke is in the process of opening Helios Press, an independent vinyl pressing plant in Brady, Texas. Cool. Well, Yosuke, welcome to White Centipede Noise Podcast.
Cool, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's pretty unusual that we're having you on in the sense that I've had almost like exclusively guests that come from the noise world. You are, as I'm sure everyone watching know, behind Nuclear War Now, which is one of, if not the biggest underground metal labels in the States or internationally. I'm really not sure, but you know, your Nuclear War Now is kind of one of the, for sure, the top dogs. And you know, there is of course a lot of the label itself is pretty pure metal, but there has been a bit of crossover in what you've released, and there's of course a lot of crossover in terms of fandom. A big thing coming up soon is of course the festival in Osaka with Hospital Productions. You've also got a pretty big project coming up, and I think that's going to be really interesting for us to talk about as well. And I think it applies to a lot of just general underground music fans, DIY operations, artists, labels, etc. So yeah, thanks for coming on. And I guess let's start off by talking about Helios.
Yeah. But before I start, I just want to just say that I reached out to you specifically because I noticed that you're doing these podcasts with noise musicians mostly, but I do believe that there's a similar undercurrent in all the underground scenes in terms of DIY ethics and how things are done. So I wanted to reach out to you and just talk shop about the underground of each scene and see where there are similarities and differences, because one of my objectives with Helios is to reach out to different types of genres out there, labels and artists directly, and try to press their records. So I just sort of wanted to understand how things worked in all the different genres out there.
Maybe when we go forward then, if you have any questions, like for me, things that you're curious about in terms of label practices, pressing, please go ahead, you know?
Yeah, I definitely have some questions about that, especially on the pressing quality side, because I've noticed that noise releases tend to be a lot more limited. Yeah,
sure.
So yeah, we'll get to that, but let me just spam Helios really quickly. So for those of you not aware, myself and a business partner are starting a record pressing plant here in Texas called Helios Press. It'll be located in Brady, Texas, pretty much in the middle of Texas. We chose that location for several reasons, but mainly because cost of operation in Brady, Texas is much lower than in Austin. So we wanted to invest in a building. We needed just highway access, essentially, and some blue-collar workers to work in the factory. So Brady, Texas met all of these criteria. So we chose Brady. We got a building already. We ordered 4 manual presses from a German company called New Built. They're going to be here in May. We just went to the building yesterday, checked it out. They've already done some work on it. Insulation is all stripped out and redone because, as you know, Texas gets hot as hell, so we have to have proper insulation and HVAC in there. And some of the demolition work has already started, so we had some rooms in there that we didn't need. We got rid of those. We're prepping the press room. So luckily, this building we got, which is 7,500 square feet, already had some rooms built out inside, which helps greatly because the machinery had to go into another room for climate control, and it was just easier to insulate and cool smaller rooms. So there was already like 2,500 or so square feet built out. So we'll put the machinery in there. These will be manual machines, which means that I'll be able to do like crazy color vinyl combinations. And picture discs and more custom stuff. So we chose manual presses for that reason. The other reason is because there are less moving parts to break on
Sure.
automatic machines that are very popular now from Viral. That's a Canadian company that's making automatic machines. Most companies in the US are using those, if not ancient machinery from the past, like United, or just like refurbishing ancient machines from like 70s and 80s and using those. But most new factories are now operating with either a manual press for color vinyl picture discs or automatic presses that have higher throughput, but a lot more moving parts, and that means a lot more issues that could arise. So we chose the manual presses for that reason.
Well,
So another spam, we're doing a fundraiser campaign to raise money for the boiler and chiller systems. That's going to start March 1st. I'm not sure if noise people might be interested, but we'll be making what we're calling Helios diehard records with sheet metal covers and special vinyl colors. Those will be done for Blasphemy, Goat Lord, Departure Chandelier, Sabbath from Japan, and Conqueror. So there must be some
for sure.
crossover, especially with
Oh,
bands
there's
like
for sure.
Blasphemy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that'll be exciting for a lot of people. I mean, I'm a big fan of Conquer, Blasphemy, and
Mhm.
that's definitely really exciting. So, what was the impetus to make this massive step for you?
Yeah. Uh, I'm kind of a workaholic, so I'm always thinking of the next steps. And I felt like manufacturing would be interesting to go into. I've always been into the DIY and just trying different things that differed from other labels. So in the early days of NWN, I did a lot of handcrafted covers and stuff like that. I just sort of stopped doing them just because of time limitations, and but I wanted to go back to that. And in fact, in 2019, I bought a bunch of printing equipment from 1984 Printing. So 1984 Printing was a very underground and punk oriented print shop in Oakland, California. They operated for many years. They printed a lot of interesting stuff like the Gilman book, and they printed a lot of my posters, inserts, booklets for records and such. And yeah, anyways, they went out of business in 2019 and they were liquidating their inventory of equipment. I ended up buying a bunch of stuff with the idea of starting my own printing company on the side. And then COVID hit, and I was still trying to learn how to use some of the machinery during the COVID lockdown days. I don't know where you're located, but in California, the lockdown was pretty severe.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get people to come over and teach me. Um, just getting supplies for the machinery became difficult. And then on top of that, we decided as a family to move out of California, and the equipment just kind of had to go. So that was my first,
Okay.
I guess, impetus to go into manufacturing. I wanted to do something more hands-on and DIY, and that was pretty much the reasoning behind wanting to go into manufacturing. So the next logical step, if it wasn't for printing, which I still haven't given up on, I think we may want to do that next after the factory is set up. Because it makes total sense. If we control the printing and the pressing, then that's pretty much the entire thing. We have distribution here.
Right. I was going to
So
ask if Helios plans to offer printing and things like that, or will that be done out of house?
it will be done by third party. So there are, many
Yeah.
printing places in the US, Dorado, Stoughton, Imprint, Ross Ellis. So I'll be printing our jackets through them initially, but down the road, we're thinking about investing in some offset printers, digital printers, cutters, and folders, and we hope to go into that industry as well. But that's still ways in the future, maybe 5 to 10 year plan. It's
Sure.
not an easy business to get into. The equipment's very expensive, and there's a lot of skill involved. So it's not like plug and chug.
Right.
Neither is record pressing, but I feel a little bit more comfortable with record pressing just because there are less moving parts and it's more about controlling the conditions that go into it. And I think I have enough experiences with records to know what is a good record. Quality control should be much easier with a record. Printing, on the
Yeah.
other hand, I have almost zero experience except for a couple of months of playing around with the Heidelberg printing machine I had.
Okay. What is your technical team or setup for the pressing plant? Are you working with, engineers or people? Do you have people that
Mhm.
are involved that are, kind of counseling you on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the yes and no. So me and my business partner are going into this, head first with no experience whatsoever, except, couple of times that we visited different factories. Like we have a friend in Italy who owns a factory, so we went over there several times to take a look, and he's been very helpful in connecting us to different people. But the good thing is with the record pressing world, everyone is just very friendly and open. They're not really gatekeeping information. They're providing almost all the context to us, and that's because there are more jobs than factories out there. So the demand is outstripping supply, sort of still.
Sure.
It's it it slowed down a little bit in 2024, but people are still very friendly and informative. They're extremely helpful. I met with I think he was the operations manager at Third Man Press. So Third Man's also using the same new built machines. Actually, they were one of the first customers of new built. So they bought 7 machines. Now they have like 14 machines with 60 employees working 2 shifts. So, their operation is much, much bigger, but he was very open to giving us information. Chris Donaldson from the East Coast. I don't know if you know him. I think he's friends with some noise people as well.
Name rings a
Uh,
bell.
yeah. But yeah, he's a friend now. He's been providing us with a lot of information, and we might go over there to check out the machines when his factory is set up in, I think, March or April or something.
Cool.
So yeah, while we don't have any experience at all, we now have sort of like a circle of people that we can ask questions,
Yeah.
and I think it's not like rocket science or something. So I
Yeah.
think we'll figure it out as we go
Yeah.
on.
Cool. What makes you confident that vinyl is a future friendly format, worth investing in right now?
Well, I've been talking about the death of vinyl for the past 15 years and it still hasn't happened. Actually, I haven't I've never been of the opinion that it was going to die because
Yeah.
I've been doing this for now 24 years, and then even before that I was collecting records for a good 10 years or something, maybe even longer. Actually, I guess I'm going on like 40 years of buying records at this point.
Yeah.
And you know, I've had this conversation with my friend Jason forever that this bubble that we're in for vinyl is going to pop, but it still hasn't popped, and in fact it's actually now including the mainstream. So, and I don't really think that the vinyl format is going to go away for the scene that we're involved in. Metal, punk,
Right.
noise has always pressed records. It's not like we stopped pressing records in the 90s when
Right.
mainstream record labels stopped, So I don't think that market is going to go away. Maybe the Taylor Swift record world will burst because I don't see them actually spinning records. It's more like them buying it as an object that they put on the
Right.
shelf or pose with on Instagram. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I fully support anyone buying physical media. I
Yeah.
mean, much better than people buying digital
Yeah.
streaming or something.
Yeah.
There are benefits to both. I'm not talking crap about digital streaming. I think I do that all day long.
Right.
In fact, right now I'm on a Throbbing Gristle kick, so I'm listening to Throbbing Gristle for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like just on repeat. But I don't own any Throbbing Gristle. Maybe like one CD or something in my collection.
Yeah.
Throbbing Gristle, but everything is available online now. So
Yeah.
there's benefit to that. I just think that physical media is the best media for active listening. That's how I like to frame it. You get the entire packaging as the artist intended to present their art. You get 12-inch sized artwork if it's done correctly. Now there are records that just look like crap. It might sound good, but they look terrible. We get a lot of those in the distro, and I just have to wonder why they don't have some sort of a vision for their art. They spend so much time crafting their music, but when it comes to the visual side, they just get it completely wrong. I don't know how that is. Does that happen on the noise side where
it does. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that does happen, and sometimes I think sometimes I find that's kind of charming, because I find sometimes you have artists that are kind of like, I call them graphic design artists, where they're like, maybe the music's kind of mediocre, but they have the image down and the cool packaging down, and you think, wow, this is really cool, but it's like the music isn't that good. I kind of like more when the music is really good, and then it's like they were like, well, what are we gonna do for the cover? And it's like, well, I don't know, just have my cousin do it or something like that. For some reason, I think that's kind of like more.
Yeah, no, there's more merit to that. I agree. On the same thing happens on the metal side. So we added a Hell Witch record from Florida yesterday. It's a brand new album, but musically it's awesome, right? It's like old school death thrash, technical, and they've been around since the 80s. They're well respected. They started out on the same label as Blasphemy. But man, the cover is like this. I'm pretty sure it was like AI generated and then touched up in Photoshop. It's one of those deals where it just looks like a digital diarrhea on paper. And I'm pretty sure the record label probably paid some so-called visual artists to come up with this atrocity of a cover. But the music rules, so I would rather have it that way too. I think music comes first, and then the visuals, and then the text. At least in the metal scene. I think aesthetics are more important on the noise side of things, right? I feel like visual aesthetics play a lot in the noise scene.
I think they're a big part of the package, and I think they're an important part of the package. Don't get me wrong, without a doubt. But not everyone's a visual artist, and sometimes people just they don't think about it until the end, and it's kind of an afterthought. But what I was thinking about, like what you were saying with the size of the vinyl plants, and the Taylor Swift albums kind of going away, maybe that's opening up maybe that could put you in a really good spot for the future. Is that like, if at some point major labels are like, okay, this is like over for us, we're not going to do this anymore, a lot of those bigger plants that have kind of survived off of that,
right,
and even pushed away some of their smaller customer base that want to press lower edition stuff, more DIY stuff, they've pushed away that customer base to take on these big contracts. Maybe that will leave a space for you guys to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to happen, right? Like some of these bigger factories have overbuilt. I've heard that there is a factory in Tennessee that purchased too much, so now they have presses still shrink wrapped and sitting on the floor doing nothing. Right? These are like $150,000 investments per machine. That's just insane. To ship one machine. It's like $10,000. So it's not like light investments. And for bigger companies like that, it's probably much harder to manage capacity because they're taking on jobs that are 10,000 units at a time or something. So they must have to deal with much bigger numbers on the
massive overhead, I'm
dollar
sure.
side as well. I guess it's always the case, right? Smaller companies are easier to manage. Of course, you don't get the economy of scale, so the profit margin might not be as big, but
Right.
I think it's much easier to manage expenses when you're operating a smaller scale factory like this. So we'll start out small. Maybe we'll expand. It would be nice if we could get higher capacity machines.
Yeah.
Um, it's we just want to do something different, and our goal is to work with smaller labels and smaller artists, of all different types of music. It'll be easy enough for us to get jobs from metal labels and punk labels just because there's
Oh,
a
for
lot more
sure.
crossover there, and I just have more contacts. But we would love to press records for noise musicians, industrial,
Sure.
even like underground rap. There's a lot of that coming out of Houston.
Yeah.
There's some comedy records that are starting to come out of Austin, and Joe Rogan's playing a pretty big role here with opening up the comedy scene. So we're hoping to press some of those records as well. That will definitely market our services to them.
Is this a unique business model that like a underground label becomes like a for us by us pressing plant? Has that happened?
Um, I think it's only happened partially once or twice before me. I might be the most visible person in the underground metal scene to pull this off, or we haven't pulled it off, but we will. We've invested so much, there's no turning back anyway. It's like do or
Yeah.
die at this
Yeah.
point. So we will, I'll cash out everything. I'll sell my house if I have to. It'll happen. But yeah, Gotawa Rex, I understand he owns part of a pressing plant, so I
Okay.
think he has some capacity at a factory. Some labels have done that. I think a newer label called Phantom Lure, they're more like dungeon synth or something, like kind of outsider metal dungeon synth stuff like that. There's not much crossover with my scene, but sometimes I get their stuff. I know that guy works at a factory. I don't know if he's a co-owner, but I know that he has access to a press.
Okay.
I guess the most well known, none in the metal scene, but Cascade is owned by TKO. They did stuff like Poison Idea and basically like classic punk hardcore stuff. So they own Cascade. And then obviously Third Man Records owns Third Man Press. That's not really underground or anything, but it started out indie rock and semi underground college rock or whatever.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for what they did because they're pretty much pressing 50% their stuff and then 50% other people's stuff. And I think that's a very good business model. I don't know. I guess, yeah, this business model that I kind of I'm involved in. I don't think I'm the first one to do it. I don't remember how I came up with this idea because it makes total sense because I can feed limited pressings of stuff into my distro and it just gets rid of the inventory issue, right? Like one of
Yeah.
the biggest headaches of running a record label of any size is not knowing how many to press. It's always a guessing game because there's that economy of scale factor you always have to calculate into. I think every label, it doesn't matter what genre, you have to calculate into, the per unit cost. Is it better to have a $15 record at cost and not sit on anything?
Right.
Or is it better to have a $10 record at cost, but sit on 100 or 200 copies for the next 3 years or something, and it takes up space in your warehouse or in your
Yeah.
house, wherever. I used to operate my label out of my garage, and space was a major issue when I was doing that. Space is still an issue in the 5,000 square foot warehouse that I'm in now.
I'm
So
sure.
that's always an issue with physical media. How many to press initially to get that, lower per unit cost. So by having my own factory, I get rid of that factor entirely. So there is a fixed cost with lacquer cutting and plating. I can't get rid of that. I'm not doing that myself, and I don't think
Right.
I'll ever do it because that's a different art and science entirely.
Okay,
The
so I
Yeah.
was I'm not totally an expert on the process, but I was in my mind just thinking, are you gonna be doing that there too? And like, so that'll be
Yeah.
done elsewhere.
Yeah.
So
So
are these lacquer machines or DMM machines?
these are so the only DMM factory in the world right now probably is GZ Media in Czech Republic. And
Hmm.
that's kind of like from legacy of having Soviet era technology, and they're
Hmm.
the ones who started doing DMM back then. So we don't have the capacity to do DMM. Most factories in the US only do lacquer cutting and traditional plating. Um, People argue over DMM versus lacquer. I think there are benefits to both. I've been told metal and punk and just loud rock music, it's better to do lacquer for whatever reason. I don't know the scientific reasons for that.
Hmm.
I've been told by sound engineers that it favors the frequencies of this type of music.
Hmm.
DMM, they say, is for classical and jazz and stuff like that. I don't really
Hmm.
understand why that is, but
Okay.
that's what I've been told.
There's so many questions I have so in my mind about, just how you run the label and how that looks as an underground metal label versus and distro versus
Mhm.
a noise label and distro. I'm also very curious about how you manage everything you do, what you do, everything. Like, how much do you delegate? How many people do you have working with you or for you? All that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. So I don't
yeah,
know. Uh,
yeah, man.
what's my
Let's
first
talk shop.
question?
It's always
What's
fun to talk about this stuff. Yeah,
I don't know if it's the first question, but I when you talked about doing it out of your garage, you're originally from San Francisco, right?
yeah,
And you're
yeah.
in
In the Bay
Texas
Area.
now,
Mhm.
and San Francisco. I mean, I don't know exactly where you're living, but that's like notoriously expensive place to live,
Mhm.
and small. Whereas now you're in Texas, which is like the wide open, free
Mhm.
capital of America. I mean, I'm sure it's not.
Right.
I'm sure it's not that inexpensive either. But I mean, um, how do you manage like what is your work? What does your warehouse look like? What do your numbers look like? How many people do you got working for you? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So let's see. Where do I begin with this?
I mean, I saw also somewhere on online like not too long ago that you quit. You said you quit your day job, and it was like, holy shit, this dude's working a day
Yeah.
job too, and running nuclear war now. Like how?
Yeah. It wasn't easy. So yeah. I ended up in the Bay Area because I did 2 years. So let me step back for a second. So I fucked around in high school and I got terrible grades. So I couldn't get into the school of my choice. I had to go to Virginia Commonwealth University, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise because it saved our family a lot of money. So at the time, I didn't have my green cards. I couldn't work. I'm an immigrant to the U.S., so
Mhm.
I couldn't work, and so basically, I had to rely on my family to pay for all the expenses. So I wanted to go to UC Berkeley straight out of high school, but my grades were crap. I was just skateboarding and listening to metal and not really doing much of anything productive. So I should have been studying and getting good grades and maybe playing an instrument or something, but instead, it is what it is. It
Yeah.
probably helped out in other ways, but I went to VCU, which is a notorious art school where people just go to party in Virginia. It's in Richmond, Virginia. The good thing was that they had a medical school connected to it, so we would go there and study and listen to sometimes we would actually listen to some noise like I don't know, easy. So first of all, I'm a surface skimmer when it comes to noise. So whatever
Sure.
bands I
Sure.
mentioned, I didn't dig very deep. So we were listening
Yeah.
to stuff like Merzbow and Masona and
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. Along with whatever black metal we had at the time. So we were heavily into Iljarn and Swart Vakter and very minimalist black metal stuff back in the college days. So we would go to the medical school and study, and that inspired me to go to medical school. So for the first 2 years of university, I studied like hell and got straight A's. and that allowed me to transfer to UC Berkeley and enter their biology department. And I ended up getting a biochemistry and molecular biology degree. And I got a job in industry. I was still thinking about going to medical school. I was studying for the MCATs, and then I discovered the joys of pressing records. In 2000, I started a record label, and then in 2001, I went to see Blasphemy. I recorded the gig. They let me release it on white record, and basically that was the tipping point. I decided at that moment that I would just make this my passion and not go to medical school. So I went into the industry. I worked for several different biotech companies. They paid well. So
Doing what? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
So, it was just bullshit tech support work, but it was still scientific.
Yeah.
The first company I worked for was like doing tech support for reagents, so basically chemicals used in research, antibodies, and then I got a job working for Silicon Genetics, which is no longer around. They got bought by Agilent Technologies. We were doing gene expression analysis, and so I would travel to different places in the US and elsewhere and teach scientists how to use this software. So I ended up in the software department. So being in the Bay Area, it was like a mecca for software development. So I ended up in the software department of this biotech company doing tech support, essentially. And then, of course, outsourcing happened because that's what big companies do. And I fucking hate outsourcing. I think insourcing is the way to go. That's kind of a tangent, but that ties into why we're doing Helios as well. We really believe in manufacturing locally and using local labor. And I worked this biotech job as a support manager. They outsourced all the tech support people to India, so I had to travel to India about 10 times over the course of 20-something years. So I guess I had that job for 23 years total. I was working this full-time job in the Silicon Valley, traveling from South San Francisco initially down to Redwood City, and then I moved to Oakland when I first had my child. That was 2008. And got a house in Oakland. So I would travel from Oakland all the way down to Santa Clara, which was, it's a pretty far distance. And I don't know if you've been to the Bay Area, but traffic is really hellish there.
Yeah.
I would leave at 5 a.m, and, it would take me 1.5 hours to get down there. And then on the way back, it was even worse because of rush hour traffic. And then I would then work whatever X number of hours on the record label. And that was my life. Even before I quit the job, I was doing 7 days of NWN regardless. So it was full-time NWN 7 days and part-time this other job. I mean, part-time because it wasn't 7 days. It was a full-time 40-hour week.
Yeah,
for this
for
other
you, that's
job.
part-time.
Yeah, but that's part-time because, Anyways, I think the reason why I'm able to do this is because I don't know, maybe I'm on a spectrum or something. I don't really know. My wife says that I have Asperger's because I can focus on one thing and just get passionate about it for hours and hours and do that same thing. And I'll get into some groove of doing something else where, now I'm like kind of crazy about health and fitness and mental health. So I've been doing some crazy regimens of daily waking up at 6, sprinting up the hill right next to my house, taking cold showers, only fasting 24 hours. So I'm on what day is it today? 22nd. So I'm on day 52 of doing that routine.
Wow.
So I get into these grooves and I can continue doing them for a very long time. This is just to show that there's something mentally off about me that allows me to do this. It's a superpower in a way. I can do the same thing over and over for a very long time until maybe my body gives out. But maybe it's partially because of my Japanese genetic makeup. Maybe it's cultural. Because in Japan, people work into their 80s and 90s easily. right? That's very common. And in a way, I think meaning in life really comes from your passion. You can see people who retire from their jobs and they just kind of wither and die. You know, they just fall and
Yeah,
they break their hip and they just kind of all of a sudden die.
sure.
Um, so I find what I do very meaningful. So I feel like it energizes me more than it takes away from me.
Hmm.
I'm not a religious person, but I do think that there's some spiritual energy inside of me that's fed by the creative people around me. I'm only creative on the visual side of things. My family does visual art going back generations, so I think that was probably ingrained in my brain. So aesthetics, visual aesthetics, graphic design, that sort of stuff I do, but I can't make music worth shit. I just never really learned how to play an instrument. I played the saxophone for a bit in middle school, but other than that, I'm not musically inclined. So yeah, I think the reason why I can do this continuously is because my spirits get energy from it. That's how I like to think about it, at least.
How are your stress levels?
Uh, there's always stress related to running a business, expenses. I have a running tally on my wall of expenses. And like this month, I had to pay something like $55,000 in expenses. And I still have maybe $20,000 more that I have to come up with. And I have to prioritize, do I pay this or do I pay that? Because I'm not sure if I can raise that much in the next 7 days. So stress levels always high.
Are those nuclear war now expenses, or are those Helios expensive?
It's now combined, I suppose.
So that
Because
includes Helios stuff. Helios stuff. That's not just the label.
well, it's mostly the record label.
Yeah.
So the overhead for the record label, I haven't even gone into that part of your question of the
Yeah.
operation of NWN. Overhead of NWN is pretty high now because I've grown the business to the point where it has a lot of expenses. So warehouse, mortgage. I have two warehouses, one in Oakland, one here. I kept the one in Oakland and just rented it out. So that one's kind of taken care of. But yeah, we got a warehouse here it turned out to be more expensive than we wanted it to be, but it's nicely located. And I'm thinking about it as more of an investment because Austin is still growing. So, yeah, stress level is high. I just deal with it, physical activity, going to the gym kind of helps.
Yeah. But you're happy.
Yeah. I think I can say that my spiritual life is very good. I'm happy in my personal life. I have an awesome wife. We have another child on the way. My kid's doing well in school. She wants to go into medicine to, recover the honor that was lost, I suppose, because I failed to do that for the family. So yeah, I mean, I think overall it's kind of weird, right? I run a label called Nuclear War Now, but I'm a very positive person overall, and I'm a happy person too.
Yeah.
I force myself to be more extroverted these days. I'm generally an introvert. I have very few friends. I have a lot of acquaintances, but very few close friends.
I have one quick question before you go on. I usually let people know on Patreon who I'm interviewing, like, a few days beforehand, and ask if they have any questions. So I do have a couple questions here peppered throughout. One question a guy named John Ingram asked, kind of regarding Helios. He says, will Helios offer any kind of consultation services for custom pressings? For example, non-standard sizes, different RPM speeds, strange material additives, stuff like that.
Probably, but we first want to perfect the art of pressing records the old school way. So I don't know what he means by additives, but I know that people have tried pressing relatives' ashes into records and stuff.
Yeah.
It might not produce good sounding records if you do that, because you'll get a lot of pops and cracks, and if you have a bone in there, we obviously can't press that into the record because it'll damage the stampers. But I mean, we're not opposed to any of these crazy ideas. Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to novelty records, period, because I've done many of those too. Weird sizes like 5 inches and And I even did 6-inch records where it was like 3 6-inches. So it was like 6 6 6 inches.
Yeah, cool.
I've done one of those before. So yeah, I'm not opposed to
Nice.
doing stuff like that.
Okay, cool. So tell me a little bit, if you can, about just the operation of nuclear war now, how that works. Because I'll just, noise labels, for example, like standard practice in the noise world is you press a record. Well, first of all, there's never contracts. You press a record with someone. It's all just kind of gentleman's agreement, email communication usually, or tape or CD, whichever. And usually the payment to the artist is just 20% of the copies. Like outside of rare exceptions, but that's kind of like the scene standard. The label doesn't pay anyone. They ship you 20% of the copies. You can do those what you want. There's not a lot of official documentation, agreements, paperwork. I think there's oftentimes misunderstandings about who can do what. People don't know. So those are just a few of like the basic things that I'm just curious about how they work in your world.
So yeah, in the metal world, it's kind of funny because everything you said.
Wave Expanse Selfie by Kate Rizzo. A buried in slag and debris release. Wave Expanse by Kate Rizzo. Available at buriedandslaganddebris.bigcartel.com. Also from distros in North America and Europe. For further info, contact buriedandslaganddebris@gmail.com.
I guess another point, I want to get back to more like specific things, but how does that affect you? I mean, as the most prominent and dominant metal label, there's got to be haters. There's got to be people, coming at you, talking shit, trying, whatever, pissed off about this or that, jealous. Does that affect you? How do you deal with that?
It used to affect me and I would respond, but I came to this Zen state. Basically, they're just lower status males, biting at my feet or whatever. So I just ignore them at this point. They will never accomplish anything in their lives. People who talk shit about people who do stuff are basically just beta males chomping at the heels of those who are actually doing stuff. They're scum. They should just be ignored. They're basically useless humans. Maybe they'll change their ways. I don't know. I don't have much hope for humanity.
Out now on Magnetic Irritation Recordings. Nauseous Ejector, Hypergraphic War Wound Part 2 cassette. The second and final chapter of the Hypergraphic War Wound series. Sliced from the same sessions as Part 1, this release continues down the same path of frantic demolition. 22 minutes of harsh noise wounding recorded straight to tape. Magnetic Irritation also offers a US-based distro stocked with a variety of other noise, industrial, and experimental releases from around the globe. Visit magneticirritation.com to purchase.
So I'm all for advancement of sciences, but I think humans sometimes forget what's important in life, and we're heading straight into a digital world where we're connected only through the screen. It might sound weird since we're discussing all this through the screen, but I do see this as a very useful tool, just like the phone is a useful tool. I think Instagram and Facebook and all of that is a useful tool. I guess I haven't articulated this point very well, but there should be some line that's drawn, right? There needs to be a threshold or a baseline of where we shouldn't cross anymore. And I think AI is that line. Like, we really should. It's probably too late. The genie's out of the box, but we should probably draw the line at AI. Like, this is going too far. We're going to lose autonomy. We're going to lose the ability to even think for ourselves if we go down this road. And that's pretty much human spiritual death to me. If we cannot create art, if we can't create visual, music, literature, then what are we?
Yeah.
We're not producing anything of worth, because I think we're really only here to procreate. I mean, that's number one. And then to create art, number two. I don't even know what the third one is. But those two things are things that I focus on as meaning of life. We do those two things: create and create, procreate and create art.
Yeah.
And if we lose that ability, and I mean, like, the birth rate's going down, so people are definitely encouraged to not have as many kids these days. People are having kids much later in life, like me. Like, I should have started much earlier. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of ranting, but I guess my point is that there is this overwhelming anti-human sentiment that's coming in the world, and I think that's very toxic to existence as a whole.
I think you're right, and yeah, anti-human is a good word for it, and it's like, but it's being kind of packaged or posited as like this warm fuzzy thing for humanity, but really it's the opposite of that.
Yeah, completely. And it's like this crazy postmodern way of presenting things the opposite way. Yeah, they package this idea of anti-human behavior as something positive, but it's only positive if Earth is barren and there aren't any humans.
Right.
We have to coexist with nature, and we have to take care of the environment, but not at the cost of killing off humans entirely. And again, this is kind of funny because I made t-shirts that say animal liberation, human extermination, but the way that I perceive this is humans, I mean, myself, I should just talk for myself, because I have a nihilistic side and I have this other side that's more productive in the world and happy most of the time, but I do have this nihilistic side. So nuclear war now, it's not a declaration, it's just a state of mind that everyone has inside. It's just this total nihilism that people usually have in their youths,
Right.
I'm not like that anymore. I think when I was younger, I was more nuclear war now and less reflective. I think more about what I need to do in life because I'm getting older. I'm 48.
Yeah.
In the past, it was more like I lived in the moment and it was crash and burn, semi self-destructive in a good way.
Sure.
Just like most good art and good artists are.
Right.
Usually good art is created by younger people who are very nihilistic and destructive. And if they continue down that path, they usually die young.
Yep.
Right? At some point, they have to decide, do I live longer and have a longer career? And maybe their art suffers. I can't think of too many people where they change their ways and the music gets better. It's usually like, crash and burn in the beginning, creating great music, and then it tapers off. If they're still around, they're just creating music, and it's kind of a career that continues into infinity, but it's not as good. I don't know. There must be many examples of that,
Oh, for sure. I mean, particularly in metal and punk, where that is the kind of the crux of that's the spirit of the music, and that's why it matters, and that's why it's so powerful.
Right.
And once people kind of maybe come to some realizations or revelations in life and grow as people and maybe become more healthy people, then maybe they don't need that anymore and they leave it behind, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like catharsis or something. Like one band that kind of stayed true to their message and their crash and burn lifestyle was Dissection. I'm not the biggest Dissection fan, but that guy really lived to his words. He did 3 albums, couple of demos, and then he killed himself because that's what he said he would do.
Yeah.
And he didn't grow old and create, boring music. I'm not a huge fan. I like this section, but a lot of people are huge fans of that band, and I can see why, because he was true to his word. He didn't keep on going and create terrible music. I think there are exceptions to the rule. I would
Oh, for
say,
sure.
Sabbath from Japan is still operating under the same type of fire that's burning in Gazal's stomach since 1984, or whenever he started. He started even before that. 1981, I think, was when he first started to play metal, but 1984 is when he started to play Sabbath. So he's really the same person that I met 20 something years ago.
Yeah.
He hasn't changed his ways. He's still working with the same record labels, and he doesn't care about money. He's just doing it for the passion of creating his metal art. So
Yeah.
some people don't change, and they can still continue to do it. But I do think that a lot of people change, and their motives change, and maybe there's more of a monetary thing involved, and it's not
Right.
about the art. It's more of like a lifestyle or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Career, more of a job.
Here's a question from the White Centipede Noise Maniac Circle Discord for you, which is relating to what we're talking about. Where have you found the motivation and inspiration to keep Nuclear War Now going with such intensity all these years? He says, as I get older, I find myself preferring to listen to old favorites rather than seeking out newer artists all the time. Has this happened to you over the years?
That's definitely happened. My passion for music has never really changed. So I feel like I'm more passionate about music than I was when I was a kid. I'm always seeking new music, but I do tend to go back to the classics more. I've seen the up and downs and the trends of, the trend cycle exists in metal. I don't know how it happens in a noise world. Do you have, bands coming back to certain styles once in a while? That
Yeah.
I've seen that
Maybe
cycle
less.
happen multiple times.
Yeah, less. I think. I'm sure noise. Well, noise is just so small. It's so small and niche. It's like I always say that, like, when one or two people gets on the internet and posts about, oh, this album was good, or oh, this album sucked, it's like, oh, everyone's raving about it. It's like, no, just like two people said something like that. It's so small, really. So I think metal is a different phenomenon in that sense, that it's a really big genre. It's tied to rock music. I mean, it's underground, but it is still tied to mainstream culture. People know what it is. People have, it's a
That's
different
true,
beast.
yeah.
It's a different beast.
Yeah. It's like I think the hierarchy of of how the different genres are structured is you got the rock music at the top that's very visible to the mainstream, and then you might have punk rock, that's more acceptable to the mainstream, and then you have metal right underneath that. Maybe metal and punk are at the same level depending on the type of music. Like most people know Metallica, most people know Iron Maiden,
right?
And then very bottom of the list is probably noise and industrial, because that's much harder for people to grasp.
Right.
That makes total sense to me. And maybe down there is where I'm also operating, like slightly above you. Some of the black metal stuff and some of the extreme metal stuff that I'm releasing is so noisy and so extreme that when, like, sometimes I have a physical store here as well in the same warehouse.
Right.
And sometimes we'll get some normies just coming in because we're listed in Google Maps and they see records. So they come in, and then we're playing like Conquer or Blasphemy, and it's to them, it probably just sounds like noise.
Yeah, for sure.
I explained to them this is like a subgenre within a subgenre. I call it bestial black metal or war metal or whatever. It kind of sounds like warfare noise, and it's supposed to mimic that kind of aesthetic as well. And they're just dumbfounded. So I can see. I wouldn't even know how to describe noise to normies like that. Somebody who is used to listening to Metallica, and that's like the harshest thing that they've listened to.
It really, it's like it really refined. It's a question of the refinement of the ear. I think literally when you hear certain stuff, if you don't have the like literal experience and practice of listening to it in a certain way, it literally does just sound like white noise that you'd hear from a radio, even metal. Like, I mean, yeah, someone listens to Conquer that has never listened. I mean, I remember the first time I listened to something with blast beats, I was like, what is this? This isn't music. Like, this is just, what's going on here? What am I supposed to follow? It's like, what am I supposed to follow?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting point. Yeah, I think that's why a lot of noise people, what's his name from the Rita? I forgot his name. Yeah, Sam. Yeah, he's a big Blasphemy, Conquer, the Fire fan. I think it's probably because there's a similarity in frequencies between like what Conqueror does and what noise music sounds like. I don't even know what the Rita sounds like, but I heard that it's like harsh noise.
It's very harsh noise. It's very minimal. He kind of coined a genre that's called harsh noise wall, and it's like 60-minute pieces that are like almost unmoving, just blocks of like harsh crunch static. And he actually has a record. I've actually never heard this tape, but he has a tape that has a cover of Conqueror. I'm sure it sounds nothing like Conqueror at all because it's really pure static noise. But he does definitely put those in direct correlation.
I gotta check that out. Yeah, I know he's friends with R. Forster and the Blasphemy guys, and I've seen the Barrier Cult videos. Just growing up skateboarding, I've always kind of monitored that scene as well.
So since Yosuke brought the Rita up, I thought it's worth sharing this incredible new coffee table art book that just came out on Amaya Productions by Sam McKinley of the Rita. It's called Correlations. For those who don't know, Sam McKinley is a very influential and important harsh noise artist. He's often copied, often misunderstood. His imprint visually and sonically is seen across the entire modern landscape, I think, of harsh noise right now. The title of the book is Correlations, and it really does just that. It drives home perhaps these initially unrelated but striking correlations in themes that run throughout Sam McKinley's works. It's a collection of images of great white sharks, shark attacks, exaggerated female aesthetics, classical art, ballet, sex workers, genre horror films, and it's presented in a way that really accentuates the harmonization between these imageries, what they mean, and the violent sound of the Rita's work, ultimately presenting it just all as pure sensory fetish. It's really, really well produced book, really nice design. The images are large and beautiful. It's just a pleasure to read through. It's an ecstatic book. There are extended essays at the front, which I haven't read yet. I just opened this up, but very exciting, very ambitious and impressive undertaking by both Sam and this guy Ross Waitman, who put it out. It just came out, I think, yesterday on Amaya Productions. You can get it at amaya-productions.com. It's limited to 350 copies. It's a visual manifesto of the Rita's work and highly recommended for anyone who appreciates or wants to understand better the inner meanings of harsh noise. And speaking of that, there is a new CD by the Rita coming out very soon on White Stepping Noise called The Alcest. It's his first new solo recording in about a year or maybe more, and it presents a new chapter in his sound. It's a return to the more layered work of the Rita, but still continuing to pursue the minimal, almost percussive crackle of recent works. It features heavy collaborative input from Lorelei and Mallory Linehan, and utilizes source recordings from stage makeup application, nylon ripping and repairing, violin, and riding crop. That'll be out very soon on White Centipede Noise, along with new CDs from Jim Haynes, Primitive Isolation Tactics, and Trerix Rosit, as well as the triple CD White Centipede Noise podcast compilation featuring 46 artists that have been on the podcast in the first 2 years, new and unreleased material from all of them, combined with audio excerpts from their interviews. When you support White Centipede Noise podcast at the Premium Plus level, you get all new White Centipede Noise CDs for free in the mail. So in addition to all the bonus content, Discord access, and everything like that, you will get all of these CDs in the mail free as a gift. There's a really good extended segment of this interview on Patreon as well. Yosuke and I go into much more detail about running a label, kind of the economics of it, the business practices of it. We kind of compare notes between being a noise label in a smaller scene versus being a big underground label in the metal scene. What's different? What's the same? It was really, really interesting for me. I think for Yosuke as well. And I think it'll be very interesting for anyone involved in DIY. So if you head over to patreon.com/white centipede noise, you can check out that video. It's over 45 minutes long, a lot of content there. And you get access to it when you support the podcast at €5 a month or more. And for the Blasphemy Maniacs out there, stay tuned until towards the end of this episode. Yosuke shared an unreleased and unheard version of Fallen Angel of Doom from a demo recording that'll be released as a fundraiser LP for Helios Press. He asked me to play the entire track in full on the podcast. So if you stick around, you'll be able to hear that for the first time ever. Now back to Yosuke. Tell me about the Hospital and Nuclear War Now festival that's coming up in Osaka, and how did that kind of collaboration come about? And is there a kind of a philosophy behind this festival for you?
Yeah. Everything we do with NWN Hospital, and basically with everything we do, we try to put some philosophy behind it, because that gives it more spiritual life, in my opinion. There's more meaning to what we do. It's not just for monetary gain, I think we operate businesses as different entities, different ideas from the mainstream. I think, when a mainstream person or just a normie person opens up a business, the ultimate goal is to make as much money as possible,
right?
And then maybe sell that company at some point and retire. Me and Dominic from Hospital, I think our agenda is to curate music, first of all, make a living off of it, so money is a factor, but number one is to curate music we like, and then try to shape the taste of people and shape culture in a way and guide people into this type of music as much as possible. So our mission and our philosophy has always been that. And that's why we've been friends for a long time. We've cooperated on different things. And now that we have this like continuous tie with Departure Chandelier that he plays in, and I'm releasing those records, it made more sense to do a festival of this type. He came to me asking, if I knew anyone in Japan. And so I started asking around. He had some connections there as well, because his bands have played in Japan many times. So we started asking people, and to be honest, it was very difficult to set up a gig in Tokyo. It's very much gate kept. There are certain people that say yes or no, and if you don't get their buy-in, it makes it really difficult to get a venue. So we ended up ditching Tokyo and going down to Osaka, where things are a little bit more open. People are, I guess, I don't know, less into gatekeeping. People are a little bit more helpful. I think there's more of a blue collar, type of mentality down there. Just do it yourself. And, people are a little bit louder down there. There's, Kansai people have this like loud, warm nature to them. Tokyo is a little bit more quiet and business-like. So it sort of made sense that we would go down to Osaka in the end. We first came up with the idea of Blasphemy headlining the metal night, and Genocide Oregon second night, the electronic night. And then I asked Beharit, because I knew that they were starting to rehearse. I didn't know if they were rehearsing to play gigs, but I asked Marco Holocausto from Beharit, and actually I had a list of cities before that I wanted to ask him. So first it was Australia, and he said maybe Australia. I asked about Austin, Texas, because that's where I reside. No answer. I asked about Germany, because we were doing another festival called Never Surrender with Iron Bonehead. He said maybe in the future or something, but not now. And then I asked about Japan, and within one day he said yes. So there wasn't much arguing back and forth. It was just like everything clicked into place, because he's really into Eastern philosophies. He travels to India for spiritual retreats or whatever he does. He visits other Asian countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia a lot. He's been into this kind of Buddhist type of philosophies for the past 10 years, maybe. I don't know, maybe even longer.
Yep.
And the occult as well. So it was an easy sell to them or to him. He is the face of the band. The current lineup consists of Sodomatic Slaughter, who was the original drummer, Holocausto, original member and songwriter, and then one guy who played on the Engram album, and then Yuha from Witchcraft. And so it's a very good lineup now. Cool. So the video that showed up on YouTube just recently, or their last gig, it sounded really good.
And they basically never really played live before, right? I mean, outside
they played live. They played plenty of gigs in the early 90s. So from 1990 to 93, they were playing gigs only in Finland. Okay. They were supposed to play in other countries, and the flyers were made, but never happened. So some people think that they played in Sweden and Norway, but those gigs never happened. So, at the time of announcement for the Japan Fest, I think we were supposed to be the very first gig outside of Finland, but they played another gig just recently. Actually, no, they haven't played outside of Finland yet, but I think they will before Japan. Okay. But we'll be the first gig for them outside of Europe, at least. They might play another gig in Italy maybe before Japan.
Wow.
The other important point for those of you who don't know Behar, they started out playing like blasphemy type of music, and then they changed their style slightly to more kind of ritualistic sounding black metal and Drawing on the Moon.
Right.
And then they started to play electronic music just out of the blue, because Marco Holocausto was very much into electronic music at the time. Mm-hmm. So, more techno stuff and more like ritual ambient stuff. And then finally, he did a noise record as well. So it sort of made sense, because the entire philosophy of this NWN Hospital Fest was to have a crossover appeal to both genres: electronic music, noise, industrial, and metal. Because we feel that it's essentially the same DIY underground mentality that permeates both scenes.
Right.
And even from an visual aesthetic and sound aesthetic point of view, there's a lot of crossover that happens between the two genres. Or two scenes, not so much genres, but two scenes. So we felt that this would be an interesting experiment. And so far it's proven to be very successful. We're not there yet. We have another month to go before the fest actually happens.
Yeah.
But tickets are gone, and people are still trying to buy tickets. So it's successful, at least on the monetary side.
Crazy.
Hopefully everything goes as planned once we're in Japan, and we don't run into any technical issues. But we don't think so.
And you guys made the decision to only offer 1 2-day pass. How do you think the crossover will, in your estimation, how do you think the crossover will work between people attending both nights? I mean, from my experience, you have more noise people that are interested in metal than you have metal people that are interested in noise.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, because metal is just much easier to grasp by the human brain. And like you said, your ears really have to be trained for harsh noise to really grab hold of you. But we have other stuff playing, that on the second day, it's not just harsh noise. There's like old tower dungeon synth. The genocide organ's more like old industrial.
Yeah.
So I think there's enough on the second day for metal people to enjoy.
Yeah.
They pay for the tickets. I think a lot of people will come
Yeah.
just to see it. And Beharit is also playing the second day as well, so they will definitely come for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Do you think like these kinds of events have a lot of crossover? Well, like, do you think putting, say, a black metal band opening for, I don't know, some popular rock band, do you think those kinds of moves have like potential to get people into the door and like check that stuff out, or do you think people just go, it's not for me?
I don't know about rock bands, but I think there's been many attempts at crossing over into the mainstream with black metal, and it's usually not successful just because if you do it right, it's very harsh, and it's not that appealing to normal people who are used to listening to, regular rock. Like the harshest stuff they might listen to is Metallica, Enter Sandman might be the harshest thing they listen to. I think Wattain's done a good job at crossing over into the mainstream and still retaining their visual aesthetics and still keeping their ties to the underground. I'm more of a fan of Wattain's ideas and visuals rather than their music.
Sure.
Because I think it's a little too produced for my personal taste.
Sure.
But I like that they're keeping their roots the same while trying to achieve a different level of success using underground black metal.
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone else who's actually doing this successfully. Like, Inquisition made it pretty big, but, the pedophilia stuff really ruined them. Yeah, that was fucked up. They're trying to come back. I think they might come back. I don't know. Metal people are pretty forgiving with these things. Yeah, and I can't really think of other bands that are enormous like Wattain. Maybe Ghost, but that's not even black metal. That's just tangential association.
They didn't look like black. They don't sound like black at all, right? They just sound like that.
It's pop. It's like pop rock, spooky kind of 70s rock oriented kind of stuff. It's so the members have played in underground death metal bands in the past, like Repugnant. So they know what they're doing in terms of writing music, but aesthetically it's kind of funny looking. I don't know. But yeah, they made it pretty big. They took it pretty far. I mean, you see like the Metallica members wearing Ghost t-shirts and stuff, and I see like just normies walking around wearing Ghost t-shirts. So maybe they're the biggest crossover from the underground to the bigger scene.
Do you think that authentic underground music, particularly extreme metal, do you think there's something there that like inherently cancels itself out or becomes diluted the more widespread or mainstream it becomes? I mean, a lot of black metal, I mean, it's not just the sound that's difficult. It's just the whole mentality and the whole,
Yeah. I mean, there's only they can only take it as far as a certain point in the mainstream. Like, I think Dark Throne and Burzum and Mayhem are pretty commonly known because of that terrible movie that was made and the terrible. Actually, the book was not as bad as the movie. The Michael Monaghan book was much better than the stupid movie that was made recently. As a tangent, that movie asked us for a Blasphemy song, and the band said no, which was a good decision. But yeah, I mean, I really don't think they can take it well into the mainstream. The average Metallica fan's not gonna listen to even Dark Throne. It's still too harsh,
right? And
there's a satanic element that might turn people off, although I guess the world is becoming more secular. They might not give a shit. Maybe the right-wing politics of Dark Throne and Burzum might turn people off. I don't know.
I mean, I remember playing, just hanging out like when I was like in high school, some backyard, and like playing Dark Throne, and some kid who was like a metalhead, he wasn't really into technical metal. Just the philosophy of like raw music, like He was like, "Well, why do you like this? This is like the drums aren't clean. It's so poorly recorded." He's like, and he put on something else. He's like, "This is like much better recorded. Like, I don't get why you like this and not this." I mean, I think that's just a hard thing for people to grasp. But it's an ideological thing. I mean, like, those bands sound like that for a reason, not because they couldn't record better or because they, you know, there's a reason for that. I think that's kind of what keeps people away and is intentionally going to keep people away.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I mean, they used to call it necro sound,
Right.
the Dark Throne guys. They would record on a 4-track on purpose to get that raw sound, because they started out recording the regular way with like Soulside Journey. That was like a proper death metal album recorded in the studio, and then all of a sudden they come back with a black metal album that's more raw, and then the second one's a little bit even more raw, and then on Transylvanian Hunger it's like a demo quality recording. I love that album. I think that was the apex of Dark Throne. They just
and every song is like 2 riffs.
Yeah, and it sounds great. I think like all the frequencies are there, all the instruments are audible. That's their best album, in my opinion. It's the most authentic Dark Throne sounding album. It doesn't sound like Celtic Frost like the first 2 black metal albums. There's no Hellhammer riffs ripped off. It's pure Dark Throne. It's very cold sounding. Now it's become almost like a meme or like, a fashion statement t-shirt or something. It's almost like the t-shirt is more well-known than the music. And I don't believe for a second that these goth girls wearing Dark Throne t-shirts, Transylvanian Hunger t-shirts, even listen to that album. It has the infamous black Aryan, or was it Norwegian Aryan black metal statement on the back.
Right.
They later removed it. But that was on the first pressing for thousands of copies,
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that they were still able to still make that album like a meme.
Right. Yeah, it's true. That's one of the things that's kind of, and some things really get held on to and really ground in the dirt. That's one kind of thing that's been kind of just glossed over.
Yeah. I find it kind of funny. I mean, it is extreme. So at the time they were probably just like, "Oh, Satanism isn't even offensive anymore. Let's just take this one more step further and make it extremely right wing and see how that goes."
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that Fenris is not political whatsoever, especially now. So I just find it kind of funny that people are so forgiving, but not forgiving for anything else.
I have another question from a Patreon supporter about kind of the noise side of things. Wanted me to ask you about the process of releasing Sissy Spacek's Ways of Confusion and how it was received by the Nuclear War Now audience.
Yeah, Sissy Spacek came about through the drummer. So the drummer was the drummer on Nelt Roth's album that I produced.
Yep.
And then he ended up drumming with Sissy Spacek right after that. Or maybe it was happening in parallel. I don't know. But I heard the stuff that he was drumming on, and I thought that was great grindcore. I didn't even think of it was noise.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they do both. I'm not actually that familiar with it.
Depends on album to album. Sometimes it's pretty straight grindcore, and sometimes it's really straight noise. And a lot of times they blend it,
Yeah, so the stuff that I was more familiar with was more grindcore. Or noisecore oriented, and I think the stuff they recorded for me, they specifically made it even more grindcore sounding, or even like war metal sounding. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty well received. I pressed too many, going back to what I said about not knowing how many to press. I should have known that I should have just pressed less, because it was more associated with the noise scene than the metal scene.
Sure.
And I know that in the noise scene, micro presses are a lot more. I guess that's more popular, or maybe it's just the norm. So I ended up pressing like 500 copies of each format, and CDs are still here. I'm giving them away at this point.
Sure.
I mean, it's a great recording. I still love it. I put it on sometimes when I need to clear my head. I just put it on. It's just like this blasting noise core for 15 minutes or so, and I turn it off and listen to something else. But it was well received at the time. It just it got kind of lost in the noise of so many releases coming out,
Sure.
And it's not something like the name doesn't ring a bell or mean anything in the metal scene. But
Right.
maybe it's more of a well-known name in the noise scene.
In the noise scene, it was kind of like a big deal because it was like everyone knows Sissy Spacek, John Weiss, the
Yeah,
frontman.
yeah.
He's really established and prolific and influential noise artist. So it was just like, fuck, Sissy Spacek's doing an album on nuclear war now. It's like, yeah, like it was kind of like, oh, they made it, like that kind of thing. It was like, just it was like a crossover to a different genre and a big label. I mean, seemingly big label on, noise terms, like
Right.
what kind of punishers do you deal with as, such a present face for like such a big label and genre, and metalheads can be difficult people. They can be there's a few nuts in the mixed bag there, right? You probably
Oh, yeah. That's a good way
probably
to put it.
what are your emails or your DMs look like, or people asking where's my order and stuff like that, like
Yeah, so that's probably the most common thing is, I placed my order 2 hours ago. I haven't gotten the tracking for it, or I haven't gotten confirmation of my order or something. That's very common. That's kind of that's part of my problem with OpenCart is that it doesn't have the capability of notifying customers as much. I personally don't like getting that. I just know that if I pay for something and I pay for something, I know I'm going to get it.
yeah.
I don't care to get like receipts in the email because I already get too many emails anyway. So I'm a little bit different in that aspect. But I get these emails of people asking me for status updates all the time. That's probably the most annoying thing. If you're doing that, people should not do it.
Yeah.
It's not a good habit. Unless it's been a long time and you're wondering what the hell happened and you never got tracking, then yeah, it's obviously justified. But if it's only been like 24 hours, please don't email anyone. Not just NWN, but any label out there. It's just annoying.
Well, it's like everyone's
likely,
used to Amazon now, where you
yeah.
I mean, anyway, but particularly in the past couple of years, where you put something order in and you expect that it's there the next day. Really, I mean, I feel the same way, kind of. When you're dealing with an underground label, you are a different level. Maybe you have a couple guys working for you, but you're still just a small team. And most of the time when you're dealing with an underground label, like a noise label, you're dealing with someone with like they're doing it out of their bedroom, and they've got all sorts of normal responsibilities, and this idea that things are just gonna come to you like right away is just crazy.
Right. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's Amazon mentality, manifested or projected into the underground or something, and that's not healthy. I mean, but I can understand. I'm sometimes like that too with with companies that are not associated with metal or underground. I expect things to happen right away. Like I had to order medication for my cat just recently, and I expected them to arrive just right away. And I mean, luckily it did, but I understand these are also smaller companies operating probably on the same scale as me. They have a couple of people on the back packing up stuff and shipping stuff. But I think there needs to be some reality check as to how people are operating small businesses and be more respectful. Punishers always exist.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I do miss the days, like, for example, 10 years ago, it was more common that every label just had a blog spot, and you'd write an email with a list of what you want, and you'd write it back, and through that developed a lot of, personal connections and friends. Like I made a lot of longtime contacts and friends and acquaintances, artists, whatever, just through order processing. And now, of course, I couldn't imagine doing that. I get annoyed when someone tries to order that way, because I'm like, oh, dude, just order through the site. But it's like that was such an important part of the scene of the culture, and that is gone. And I do think that there's something to be said for that. That's not always a good thing.
Yeah, sacrificing humanity for, I guess, for convenience. I mean, I'm guilty of doing that as well. I hate getting emails.
You have to.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to scale up, then you have to sacrifice some of that. But I still remember sending cash through the mail in the 90s and hoping that it doesn't get stolen. And it would happen once in a while where, you know, I'll lose like $100 in the mail. I think the most I've lost was $500. I was trying to buy some rare records or something from Germany. I sent $500 registered, you know, and obviously it didn't get there.
They're like, oh, we never got. Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. But yes, I don't miss those days, but there must be like some happy medium where,
yeah,
you know, you're not bombarded with 300 emails a day. And
yeah, I mean, at some point you get kind of overwhelmed by it. I imagine, like in the early days, it's really exciting making all those correspondences, but at this point, it's like just to answer another email is kind of like, oh, it must be for you. Just like, man.
Yeah, no, emails are the bane of my existence right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I like hearing from people. Don't get me wrong. I like hearing from my friends, and I made a lot of, you know, acquaintances and friends over the years in the metal scene. I know a lot of people from around the globe, but
Yeah.
it's just hard to keep up, man. It's like every day I wake up at 6, you know, I put on some music and I do my routine first, all the crazy shit that I do. Sit down with a cup of coffee and then I go start looking at emails. And it's just time consuming. I'm never on top of emails. I can never catch up. That's one thing that people should understand is when you email me, it's probably one of 300 emails coming in that day. So I try to prioritize the most business critical ones from factories or bands or, you know, I don't know, whatever. It's like these things I have to do on a daily basis I'm doing. But if you don't hear from me about order status, it's not because I don't want to talk to you. It's because I just don't have the time in a day to deal with all of the emails, because I know that if you email somebody, they're going to reply back.
Right.
That's just the rule of thumb. It's never the case that you email somebody and then it's like end of transmission, right? It's usually they usually write something back, even if it's like thank you for your help, which is nice, but that's just another email you have to open up.
Yeah.
So yeah. I tend to delete emails that are irrelevant. If it's something like where's my order? If it hasn't been long enough, I'm sorry to say, but I just delete those.
How much gratification do you get from the different aspects of what you do? Because, like, you know, you run this crazy business and you're opening up a new one. And like you just talked about, you know, there's so much emails. There's got to be a lot of busy work.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you get the most gratification? What things less? Like even in like the split down of like releasing records versus distro.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you enjoy the most? Where do you earn the most money? Or if you're willing to talk about that kind of stuff, or, you know, just.
Yeah. I saw, you know what Moomin is? It's an old Finnish.
The cartoon. Yeah.
Comic cartoon, and animation. My wife is from Finland, so I like Moomin. And Moomin has a lot of
book for my baby. We were just reading her that in Polish.
Moomin books are great. They carry a lot of I don't know, lessons and atmosphere that's very Finnish.
Yeah.
You know, kind of gloomy in a way and like kind of cold, but warming at the same time. Yeah. I really like Moomin. Anyways, I saw a meme recently, just a clip of a Moomin cartoon that said, "What is duty?" And the answer was, duty is something you just have to do in life that you don't want to do. So that's how I think about stuff related to NWN that I don't really want to do. It's just duty. You know, it's something you just have to do, means to an end, because the ultimate goal is to run this business and be independent. So if I want to be independent, pay the bills using NWN, then I have to do the grunt work, you know, do the busy work of answering emails, doing the taxes, you know, dealing with angry customers sometimes. There are many things in a day that I do that I don't really like, but it's just something I have to do. But there are many things in the daily operation that I do enjoy. Like I said, I'm more of a visual person, so I probably have a little bit more visual IQ than musical IQ, maybe. I don't know. You know, I like to work on the graphic design aspect of each release. I'm not the most well versed in all the tools, so I can get the mock-ups usually by myself, but I can't get it print ready. Maybe I can learn that, I don't know, in my next life, or if I can clear some space in my day. First Helios, and then maybe I'll tackle that next. But I work with a graphic designer that I've been working with for many years now, and I trust him. His name is Dan Freed. He also does noise. I don't know
Dan
what
Freed?
project. Yeah, you know Dan Freed?
Yeah, man. I do know him. He did a project called. Yeah, interesting. That's good to know.
He's from Portland. Yeah, he's been in many metal bands in the past, and
he did the graphic design on a Pieces. He did a graphic design on a Pieces record I put out, and yeah. Please give him my best. He kind of disappeared from noise, but please tell him Oscar says hello if you have a chance.
Oh yeah. I talk to him daily. So like right now he's working on a Nebulos record for me. Cool. It's an old Colombian black metal band from '93 or so. Anyways, yeah. So this aspect I really enjoy. This is something that gives my inner spirit some energy. I think about my inner spirit as like a battery pack for the soul or something, and some tasks will deplete from it. If I have to deal with toxic people, they tend to deplete my energy level. They're like energy vampires. But if I have to interact with somebody like Dan, who's very creative, and we're talking shop about graphic design or something, that's very charging for me. That charges my soul and my spirit. And so yeah, stuff like that. And also, with the physical store, people come in, and I've met so many people since moving to Austin. I moved here July of 2021, and since then I pretty much met the entire scene of Texas and elsewhere too. A lot of people from out of town come into Texas, and especially Austin. I met a lot of people here. I've made some great friends. So that aspect of my job, and it is part of my job now, I get to just like talk metal with musicians and collectors, and nerd out about some pressing that exists. Like I met Rodney from Devastation. Devastation is an old thrash band from the 80s, and Rodney is known as one of the craziest collectors in the metal scene. His collection is like worldwide known to be one of the best. So yeah, he's insane. He had, at one point he had something like 11 copies of the most rare metal record in the world. 11, each one sells for like $5,000 or something.
Which is what?
Militia's sibling 12-inch from 1986. Only 100 copies were made, and some of them got destroyed or given away, and I don't know how many exist in the world, but probably no more than 20 or 30 or something. And he had 11 copies in his collection. And he was hoarding them for the longest time. He wouldn't even trade or sell them. He traded me one copy last year for the most rare black metal album, which is Flames of Hell from Iceland from '87. Okay. It was a one-time pressing of, I don't even know how many copies, but it was pressed by a French label and then not distributed. Okay. I think maybe a few copies escaped or something, and my copy came from a homeless guy who was selling his records in France, in Paris. Some punk guy picked it up and then sold it to me for, I think at the time, $1,000. Now it goes for $4,000 or something. Wow. I had an extra copy of it. I had two. I don't even know how I came across two, but I had two copies of that. So he traded me a Militia record for that record. Wow. So that's the kind of nerdy shit that happens at our shop.
That's cool. I mean, man, huge respect that you do it the way you do it. I mean, you're living, you must be on the one hand exhausted, but I can totally relate to how that just, just gives you energy, and it's living, it's living the dream.
It is a dream, man.
And it leads to deep happiness.
It is. I mean, like I said, back in 2001, when I decided medical school was not it, I had to decide what is my future. At the time, I was young, so I didn't know what the future held for me, but I just kept on working at this record label thing and releasing records and working with bands. I mean, when I first started, I had no idea. I didn't think that I was going to be working with Blasphemy for this long, or I did records by most of my favorite bands at this point, either through licensing or through, actual contracts of new albums or whatever. But, I've done Sarcophago, Inri, which is one of my favorite records of all time.
Yeah.
The Hair Drawing Down the Moon, Oath of Black Blood, every Blasphemy record. We done multiple festivals with Blasphemy. We're going to do a festival with Beherit. It's as close to living the dream as I can get, at least in this realm. My personal life is also living the dream. I'm married to a beautiful woman who is very intelligent, very creative, and has similar values. She loves cats. We're gonna have a child together. So yeah, I mean, I think my spiritual life is great right now. My battery is fully packed. I don't feel tired. I feel like I can do this for another 50 years if I wanted to.
But how does your family deal with the, amount of stuff that you have going on and your obvious, dedication to something so heavy?
Chuck Killer from Order from Chaos called me the perpetual motion machine recently, and that's basically how everyone sees me in my personal life. So they're not really surprised about the fact because they knew that I was going to do something next after NWN or in parallel to NWN.
Yeah.
I'm never satisfied with the status quo. I tell people that inertia is just a death blow for your spirit. Your spirit cannot stay charged if you stay in the same place forever. You hear me, Jason? You have to move to Austin and bring Tanya because the Bay Area is not the place for you. You have to move here. So I do think that staying in one place, either physically or mentally or, in your career, is spiritual death. That's how you die. That's why, like we talked about earlier, that's why when you retire, that's when the health starts to decline, right? Like old people will start to die as soon as they retire from their job. They always talk about the golden years of retirement or something, but I think the golden years are the years that you're working a job that you want to work.
The difference is, though, that very, very few people find work that is meaningful for them.
That's because they're scared. I think they don't have a vision for themselves. And that's first things first is you have to think about how your life is structured and what you want out of your life. Because like it or not, the physical body is going to die at some point. There's a finite number of years you have on the earth. And it's not about the accumulation of wealth or physical objects or whatever, even though we all partake in that. It's actually like the accomplishments or whatever you do in life that gives you satisfaction. Like I said, creation and creation, procreation. I think children gives you the most meaning in life, but there has to be a secondary reason to exist. You can't be a parent forever. I mean, you are going to be a parent forever, but at some point, if you do your job right, they're going to leave your house.
Yeah.
And you're going to be alone. So you have to have another creative outlet. I think everyone does. Otherwise, you're just going to wither and die.
Yeah. Has there been any...
Yeah, I mean, okay, so your question about how does my family feel? I think my wife wishes that I was home more. She's a stay-at-home wife and soon to be a parent. So she's at the house. Sometimes she'll come with me to the warehouse and she has her own office where she draws stuff and she'll help me out with the business. But we came to the conclusion that it's not good for her to be working for me because the dynamic of a boss employee just doesn't work when you're married to somebody. So that's not a good idea for
Yeah.
anyone who is out there thinking about starting a business with your wife. Think very hard, because you really have to separate your personal life from your, from your job.
Yeah.
I mean, at least as far as the family is concerned. Now, you should definitely intertwine your personal life with whatever business you're doing, because otherwise you're not going to retrieve any meaning from it. Basically, this flag is me. It's just everything that I do revolves around the record label. My identity is pretty much tied to it. So I think my wife understands. Rest of my family understands 100%. My other kid, she's 15 now. She 100% understands. She grew up with me obsessed about metal. The interesting thing is that she doesn't like metal herself, though.
It's the classic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this was very informative. I really appreciate you sharing all this with me. I usually ask most of my guests at the end of the thing, I like to put them on the spot and ask them their top 5 noise records of all time or releases of all time. I know you're a noise skimmer, but for the people who want to know, what are your top 5 metal records of all time?
I'm just a noise skimmer, so I shouldn't mention them, but I'm pretty obsessed with Throbbing Gristle right now, so I can talk about at least Throbbing Gristle, and then I'll talk about my favorite metal albums. But I mean, like, First Annual Report gets played a lot. I mean, to the detriment of my wife, because she doesn't really like it. The funny thing is, like, when I first listened to Throbbing Gristle when I was 19, my friend Jason played it for me. He's more of a noise guy. He runs a label called Influencing Machine. So shout out to Jason. He's my best friend. Yeah, we were supposed to go to medical school together, but we both chose different paths in life. But when he played it for me, it didn't really click. At the time, I was more just harsh noise. Industrial music wasn't doing that much for me. Now it totally clicked. I don't know why. It just, in the past few months, that's all I've been listening to on a daily basis is Throbbing Gristle.
Throbbing Gristle is heavy.
The more structured stuff that they've also done, like United, like that whole that smooth jazz, whatever that electronic music did. That album also gets played a lot as well. So
cool. All right, you're Throbbing Gristle. That's good.
On noise and industrial. Okay, black metal. I have a PhD in black metal, so can talk more intelligently about that. Number 1 for me is probably Sarcophago Inri. That's a timeless classic of forever. I think it's so ahead of their time, and it's so well constructed that anybody who is into metal should listen to Sarcophago Inri to understand how far ahead they were. This is 1986, 1987 that they were working on this shit. And it's pretty much the archetype of black metal too. I mean, of course, Bathory and Venom and stuff, but Sarcophago really took it up a notch with like spikes and corpse paint, and just the whole visual aesthetic was way ahead of their time. And then DD Crazy's crazy drumming. DD Crazy's name stands for Dude Drums Crazy, because very crazy. V was not in there, but it's supposed to be Dude Drums Very Crazy. That's his full name. Nice. In which he did. It's very crazy. I think he came up with this style of hitting everything at once blast beats that BLASPHEMY started to do, and Conqueror does as well. That's where that started. The style of Wagner Antichrist vocals is still used to this day. I mean, obviously, other people have done something similar, but pitch shifted accents, interspersed, kind of sprinkled. That's still being done, like BLASPHEMY took cues from that.
Yep.
Conquer, obviously. Other bands have done that too. If you look at old Mayhem photos, you'll see them wearing Sarcophago t-shirts. So obviously they had influence on that scene, like in Europe as well. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that a scene that was born in Brazil in in 86, 87 was so influential, but then it sort of fizzed out by the 90s. And we discussed that in a different podcast with Tawfiq from Zombie Dance, because he did a book about the 90s Brazilian scene. Actually, I have it right here. So people who are interested in Brazilian metal should get this book. I published that on NWN, but that's about the 90s Brazilian scene. 80s Brazilian scene was so influential, and it's just very interesting that the mainstream metal press almost gave it no attention whatsoever, but the underground paid attention to it even from the beginning. Like Sarcophago, obviously Sepultura they were the only band that actually escaped that sphere, and we made it bigger. But you can argue as to why they started to play terrible new metal later on. But yeah, I mean, Brazil produced some of the best music. Inri is number one in my book. I think I'll just make the top 10 Brazilian metal because in hindsight, I probably five. So it doesn't go on.
Brazilian, no, that's a great one. I mean, I know Inri is like, I mean, I'm kind of a metal skimmer, a little bit more than a skimmer, but Inri is like also, that's up there like as that's just magical shit. I mean, that's just magical music.
Yeah. Something happened on that album. The fucked up drum sound, it almost sounds like a drum machine, but it's not. It's just the production. Just the vocal patterns from Wagner Antichrist. The guitar playing that's a little bit beyond their means. They're playing a little bit beyond what they're supposed to be playing.
Yeah.
That all kind of comes together into this very organic sounding and aggressive album that is timeless.
Yeah.
Running out of adjectives to describe Sarcophago because it's too good. But yeah, number
Next
two,
Brazilian band. I think that's great. I know a few others. Like, I don't know. Well, go ahead. Say your.
Yeah, number two for me is probably Expulsor's Fornication side of the split with Brutal Distortion. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Expulsor did only like 2 records in their entire career. The first one was a split, and their side of the split is kind of like the Void side of the split with Faith when it comes to like punk rock splits. Everyone just talks about the Faith side. Nobody gives a shit. Or sorry, Void side, not the Faith side. It's kind of like that. So split with Expulsor, that side is called Fornications, and it's like Sarcophago, but then like Sarcophago taken up a different notch. I mean, it sounds like Sarcophago, but even more extreme, maybe. Cool. So I recommend that as number 2. Number 3, I would say is Sex Trash, Sexual Carnage. And on this album, DD Crazy is the drummer.
Yeah,
he's on the cover, looking almost pretty much the same as he did on the album cover of Inri. Yeah, he again lives up to his name of Dude Drums Crazy. Vocal performance by Pussy Ripper. he's actually deceased now. It's obviously influenced by Sarcophago, but it's a slightly different take. I don't even know. I can't put my finger on what the special formula is with that Sexual Carnage album. But again, it's something magical that happened in Brazil, and only in Brazil. It's like the most Brazilian sounding thing. Sarcophago, Expulsor, and Sex Trash, maybe to some extent Volcano. It just sounds like Brazil. Yeah. I don't know. They're playing like Slayer riffs much faster than you're supposed to or something, and the Dude Drums Crazy style of everything at once.
Yeah.
I like music that's grounded in culture and place and time that you cannot recreate again.
Yeah.
So you can mimic it, some bands will try to recapture the sound, but yeah, it's hard to mimic that style. So number 4, probably Holocausto, Campo de Exterminio. Sketchy politics aside, it was just for show. So,
Of course,
don't get bent out of shape. They were just trying to offend you.
Yeah.
And they probably did. So it's kind of like another take on Sarcophago. They came up around the same time. They were on the compilation Warfare Noise 1 with Sarcophago, Chakao. Mutilator was on there too, although Mutilator sounds a little bit more tame compared to what they used to call deathcore back in the 86, 87 days. And then maybe number 5 is, I don't know. I guess the most obvious would be one of the Sepultura records, but I'll leave them out because they became kind of lame later on. I'll say Volcano Bloody Vengeance. Yeah. Cool. Volcano was actually not from the same city. They were from Sao Paulo. And they also predate Sarcophago, Holocausto, Sex Trash. They started in the 70s playing more of a heavy metal style, and then they evolved to this like crazy thrash, death thrash sound, and then Bloody Vengeance was pretty much their pinnacle achievement. But what makes them interesting is that their first 7-inch was heavy metal, and then their second release was their first album was a live album. For some reason, their first album was a live album. Like, what band does that?
Yeah,
that's such a weird move. But they had a song called what the hell was it called? Was it called Witch's Hammer or Witches? Something Witches. But yeah, that song is like is one of the best Brazilian songs ever recorded, I think. And for some reason, they never re-recorded it again on their studio album. So it only exists on this live album.
Crazy. Could it be a cover?
It actually got covered by Niflheim, and Niflheim did a killer job of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I mean, could their version be a cover of someone else?
No. It's an original song. Yeah. Yeah, cool. And then Niflheim covered it on the Headbangers Against Disco compilation 7-inch in the 90s.
Awesome. Great. Top 5 Brazilian death thrash, black metal.
Yeah.
I guess whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, proto whatever. I mean, back then they were just calling it deathcore, because it was kind of like a mixture of grindcore and death metal. But to me, it's, first generation black metal or something, because that's when they came out with visual aesthetics and the sound that still exists to this day.
Sick, man. Well, where should people go to support Helios Press and get this plant up and running?
Yeah, so we have a pretty big hill to climb before the factory is launched, hopefully later this year. We're trying to raise $300,000 to $400,000, and we first entertained the idea of doing a Kickstarter campaign, but I don't like the idea of giving 10% of the proceeds to Kickstarter. So, and I mean, Kickstarter is only good for people who just don't have any audience. I already have a built-in audience.
A huge audience.
I already have the trust of people who buy from me on a daily basis. Yeah. So we're going to run the campaign through the NWN shop. So you can find a link on NWNprod.com.
There's a link in the description of this YouTube video or podcast if you're listening.
Yeah, so NWNprod.com, and then there should be a link to the shop on the front page. You can find the page that I created for Helios Press there. We're starting the fundraiser campaign March 1st. So,
and you're offering like benefits and special records and things like that.
Yeah, so it's not a donation system, so well, you can think about it that way, but we're selling products and services essentially to raise money. So we'll do some limited edition records, some crazy stuff in there. Actually, we're doing a demo version of Fallen Angel Doom. I posted a clip of it on Instagram if anybody wants to hear. It sounds completely different. The vocals are pitch shifted like crazy. You can tell that they were just experimenting in a studio, just recording different stuff. The guitar leads are different. The song structures remain the same, but the vocals and guitar parts are very different. The recording is very raw. It doesn't sound like, it's very listenable, but it is raw compared to Fallen Angel Doom, which is already raw. So, but noise people are used to the raw sound. So, so nothing to be scared of. Yeah, and we're doing Conqueror's album as a limited edition. Goat Lord is going to be interesting because it will be a different take that's never been released. And one of the songs has Mitch Harris of Napalm Death on vocals. So he was sessioning for them at the time, and they recorded one song with him on vocals. It never got published. So this will be the first time that comes out.
Wow.
The Departure Chandelier, Antichrist, Rise to Power. We're doing a limited edition of that. We're doing a Sabbath record that consists of 2 songs that appeared on the first 7-inch in '84. They found 2 alternate versions that they were recording in the 80s and 90s, so we'll put that on the record. And it's also their 40th anniversary, so this is kind of like their 40th anniversary record. Or one of many, probably, because they tend to do a lot of records. Yeah, and then like in terms of services, we'll have mastering at a discount from Enormous Door. Jack Control is I think he also does noise as well, but he's more known for being the vocalist of World Burns to Death, hardcore band from the 90s. Discounts in the NWN shop and discounts on future orders with Helios. So if you put 100 down with us in advance, that gets applied to the order, and you also get like 10 to 15% off or whatever.
Nice. Great.
So we'll have stuff like that in addition to basic stuff like patches and t-shirts and totes.
Yeah. And that launches March 1st?
March 1st, yeah, in our shop. So yeah, I don't know exactly what time, but it should happen sometime March 1st. I'll probably use March 1st European time so that I can do it before going to bed.
Yeah. Great. Well, we'll keep an eye out for it. Anything else you want to mention or add, or?
No, I think this has been a very interesting interview, and I like these interviews because it's just interesting to talk shop with somebody who's from a different scene but has very similar understanding of how things work in the underground.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities, and I hope that we can stay in touch and collaborate and talk more in the future.
Hails.
Yep.
Thank you, man.
Yep. Thank you.
Hey, it's Yoske from NWN Productions. I want to tell you about Helios Press, a brand new vinyl pressing plant that we're opening up in Brady, Texas. Our mission is to produce high quality records for independent artists and labels out there. I've been running NWN, an underground metal label and distribution company, for 24 years now, so I know exactly what it takes to produce a record. The idea of opening up a pressing plant was something that's been circulating in my head for a very long time now. And more specifically, I wanted to have a factory that serviced people like me and other independent labels and artists out there. So I called my friend, we pulled our money together and started Helios Press. We're only 3 months into the project, but we've already made great progress. So far, we purchased a building in Brady, and 4 pressing machines have been ordered from Germany, and they're supposed to arrive here this summer. Construction's already started on the building, and we're now concentrating on the infrastructure. We've taken it as far as we can using our own money, and now we're asking our supporters for help. Your contributions will be used to purchase the boiler and chiller systems and speed up the process of opening up Helios Press. As a contributor to this campaign, you'll be entitled to a number of exclusive deals. All backers will have their name on our website forever and get their names added to an insert that will accompany the first NWN LP that's pressed at Helios. Other rewards include exclusive color vinyl of different NWN titles, exclusive test pressings, Helios t-shirt and totes, discount on your first order with Helios Press, discount on all NWN orders for 1 year, discount on audio mastering from Menorah Store, and several other great deals. Thank you for your support and contribution. Together we will make Helios into a world-class vinyl pressing plant for the underground and beyond. Please follow us on Instagram for updates.